This is Royce Towns. I'm the ruminant nutritionist with Tennessee Farmers Co-op Feed Division. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking to you about co-op sheep and goat feeds, how we use those and how to recommend those, and maybe some management tips for dealing with your sheep and goat producers. Sheep and goats have been increasing in popularity. In Tennessee, there are about 140,000 goats right now and about 34,000 sheep. What we're seeing is that they are very attractive to the natural homegrown set. They like them because they like to know where their meat comes from. They like to grow their own animals. We see them being very popular for 4-H projects because they don't require a large amount of land or a lot of facilities to do those. We also have people that are in the sheep and goat business to make money. They're interested in maximizing profits. Regardless of which set they're in, they all desire information, and they come to you at the co-op as a source for a lot of that information, and that's what we want you to be able to provide for them. We typically talk about sheep and goats together as small ruminants because they are so similar. The NRC says that the nutrient requirements for both sheep and goats are very, very similar, with one notable exception, and that would be copper. Sheep are not very tolerant of copper, and they don't need that in their diet typically. They both have somewhat similar forage preferences with a little bit of difference there, and reproductive wise they both operate almost exactly the same. So that's why we'll be talking about the two of these together, and we'll try to note the differences as we go through here. When we look at the diet preferences, sheep tend to be a little bit more like cattle, meaning that they'll consume, if they have the option, they'll consume the largest portion of their diet as grasses, and to a smaller extent some of the weeds and forbs, whereas goats tend to be more like the white-tailed deer that are here in the state. They're browsers. They'll spend the majority of their time browsing and picking leaves and blooms off of brush and shrubs. One of the problems we run into here in Tennessee is people will get into the goat business and they'll tend to put them out on fescue pasture where they don't have the option to browse. In that case, then they do consume all grasses, but that's not what they'll do in nature, and that leads to some of the issues that we have to deal with goats. As far as some of the nutrition basics, as I said, the goats are browsers, whereas the sheep tend to be more like cattle. Both of them are ruminant animals, meaning that they have a functioning fermentation vat that allows them to digest these forages. With the goat, they have prehensile lips, meaning that they have very manipulative lips that allow them to pick leaves off of things like blackberry briars without damaging themselves. That also plays an influence as far as how we feed them, meaning that if we feed them a coarse or a mixed type feed, they're much more able to sort out the ingredients that they like and leave the other behind if they want to, as compared to a sheep. In both cases, they have lower incisors and an upper dental pad, just like cattle. They have no teeth on top and front, but they have very strong molars in the back, and that's what they use to grind up the forage and to chew their cud as they're processing this forage. If you look at the comparative capacity of their GI tract, they are much more like cattle, the sheep and goats are. It takes a large volume of digestive organs to be able to process the volume of forage that they have to go through. So you see the sheep and goats tend to be much more like cattle than they do horses or pigs or simple-stomached animals. I mentioned that they are a ruminant. They have a functioning rumen, which is the large fermentation vat, and in a mature animal that can hold as much as 5 to 10 gallons of liquid, so it's a fairly large organ. This is where they first take in the forage, then they will go somewhere and lie down typically, and they will chew their cud. You'll see them, they can regurgitate boluses of that forage. They'll chew it a second time, and then it'll go down and pass from the rumen into the reticulum, from there into the omasum, which is the round volleyball-looking organ there, and then finally into the abomasum, which is the true stomach. It's the rumen, though, that gives them the ability to utilize the roughages and the forages that we expect them to consume. Inside that rumen are a number of bacteria, protozoa, and fungi. There are over 150 different species that have been identified. They allow them to ferment fiber. They allow them to ferment the starches and carbohydrates in feeds. And when they're all working in harmony, everything works really good, and they're able to provide for themselves. Much like with cattle, though, there are times or situations where, because of the forage they're consuming, they're not able to meet their nutrient requirements, both for the animal itself and for the offspring that they're trying to get pregnant, gestate, and produce milk for. From the reproduction standpoint, I mentioned that goats and sheep are very similar. They're both seasonal breeders, meaning that they are influenced by the day length. Left to their own devices, most animals will breed between August and February, and that's after the days begin to shorten. Now, that does not mean that they don't breed at other times of the year, but the majority of the breeding occurs during those years. Both species are induced ovulators, meaning that if they have been away from a male and then they are exposed to a male, that they will all, a herd of females will all begin to ovulate at the same time. So it kind of synchronizes them, and that can be used as a management tool to get them to tighten up your birthing seasons there. In both species, gestation lasts 150 days, so about 5 months, and twinning is normal. With goats, they are a little more prolific than the sheep. The average litter size or offspring size for goats is 2, and it's about 1.5 for sheep. In both cases, those animals respond to flushing. And when we say flushing, we're talking about increasing the energy content of their diet just prior to our breeding season. So we're flushing them with energy, and what that does is it causes their brain to interpret that they are in a very good situation, that nutrients aren't limiting, and it's okay for them to produce more offspring. So what they'll do is ovulate more eggs. So if we want to increase the number of offspring that we have, flushing is a very good management tool to do that with. A health topic that comes up quite regular with both species is urinary calculi or kidney stones. We hear a lot of misinformation out there, but urinary calculi are mostly related to the calcium to phosphorus ratio, not so much to purely the amount of calcium that's there. Anytime the calcium to phosphorus ratio is 2 to 1 or higher, meaning that we have twice as much calcium as we do phosphorus, or even more calcium, we're okay. It's when the phosphorus level gets up even with the calcium or exceeds calcium that these crystals start to form inside the kidney, and it usually results in a blockage of the ureter and typically in death of the animal. That's something we'd like to avoid, obviously. One of the best recommendations you can make is to make sure that the animal has ample, clean, fresh water available all the time. Now that means if you go and check that water, would you drink it yourself? If not, that's not clean, fresh water. Animals will consume more water when it is clean and fresh as compared to otherwise. Now, as a secondary thing, what we can do to manage urinary calculi is we use ammonium chloride as an additive in the feeds. Ammonium chloride tends to acidify the urine. By lowering the pH, that lessens the likelihood of these crystals ever starting to form in the kidney, and serves as a means of helping prevent that. Now, it's not 100%, and it won't do anything for stones that have already formed. It is only there as a preventative. So when do we want to feed these animals, and how and why? I've already mentioned flushing. 2 to 3 weeks prior to our intended breeding season is an excellent time to increase the energy level in the diet to help those animals produce more eggs, ovulate more. During the last third of pregnancy, with sheep and goats, much like other species, that's when the majority of fetal growth occurs and the nutrient requirement for that animal goes up. So we'd like to feed make sure they're not deficient at that point so that the offspring are born strong and healthy. And during the first 60 days of lactation, that's when the greatest nutrient demands are on that animal. And once they start producing milk, and we'd like to supplement them there as well. Creep feeding is another good time that we can help out that female. If we can allow those young baby sheep, baby goats, access to some type of supplemental feed, that will reduce the load on the animal. They will not be nursing as much milk from the female. Growing animals oftentimes do need some supplemental feed along with developing replacements. If we're doing a good job with our breeding program, our replacement female should have the greatest genetic potential of any animal there on the farm. So we don't want to hamper them by any type of nutrient deficiency, and we want to grow them right so that we have good functional females. In talking about the replacements, the babies, either goats or sheep, are born pre-ruminants. They're not ruminating at that point. As they nurse milk, that bypasses the rumen and goes directly into the abomasum. The rumen develops both in size and function over time as they gradually begin to consume forage and grain. So that's something we need to keep in mind as we are talking about feeding programs for replacements. I've already mentioned the creep feeding. That's an excellent way of providing some supplemental nutrition to those kids. Maybe not the most cost-effective gains, but sometimes that's not the primary factor. We want to either maximize the growth of those little ones or ease the burden on the female. And you see in the picture there a couple of different creep feeders and gates that are available, and people can make their own as well. Anything that's slatted that prevents the older animals from getting in and allows access by the young ones. Once those animals are weaned, the doelings and doelings when we talk about goats, and ewes when we talk about sheep, they can be weaned when they reach about 2.5 pounds of their birth weight, and they're consuming at least an ounce of starter feed. We don't want to wean those animals until they are consuming enough feed. That's an indication that rumen is developing and that they'll be able to sustain themselves once we take them off milk. Post-weaning, from there on up to adulthood, our primary emphasis is going to be on developing that rumen and the gut capacity, and a secondary emphasis on rate of gain. We don't want to fatten replacement females. That causes problems for milk production when fat replaces the milk-producing cells in the udder. They can reach breeding size as early as 7 months. We typically don't recommend that. Intensive management with some dairies, they will have animals that reach breeding size at 7 months. It's also a good opportunity during this post-weaning phase to utilize the ionophores like Rumensin and Bovatec, and also pay attention to whether we have a coccidiosis problem, and be sure we address that with the appropriate coccidiostat. We'll look at our goat line of feeds first. Starting out, we'll start at birth with the young baby. We have an 18% pelted goat starter, which is designed for suckling kids. You would feed it up to about 5 to 6 weeks of age, and you can think of it as a baby food for goats. Very palatable, very digestible, providing them with the nutrients that they need for that young suckling animal. Moving up to the next phase then, past 5 or 6 weeks, we'd like to go to the pelted goat grower with Rumensin. As they begin to consume more feed, we can change the nutrient density of that feed and make it more appropriate for the level of growth and their stage of growth. We have a 16% GORT as a non-medicated option for people that are looking for a coarse type feed where you can visibly see the grain. One application for this feed might be for the people that are consuming milk from their goats and don't want a medication. Sometimes we see people making cheese from that milk. They too do not want a medicated feed. A general recommendation for this for a milking animal would be 1 pound of grain per 2 pounds of milk produced. We would not want to exceed more than half of their diet dry matter as the feed. As a better choice for milking animals, the 16% pelted milk goat enhancer follows the same technology as our enhancer type dairy feeds, meaning that we can provide a high source of a high level of energy, multiple sources of protein, and maximize milk production out of that goat. The 16% pelted milk goat enhancer would be the premium option for the milking goat. We have multiple sources of protein and a high level of non-structural carbohydrates, meaning that we got ample protein and energy for maximizing the milk production in a milking goat. This product follows with some of the same technology we've used in our enhancer dairy feeds, and does an excellent job of substituting for some of the forage or making up for poor quality forage. As far as a free choice mineral for goats, the Supreme Goat Mineral is a premium product, has organic trace minerals, selenium yeast, and even the kelp meal that some goat producers are looking for. This product, typical consumption is 1/4 ounce per head per day. While we're talking about mineral, this comes up from time to time. What about trace mineral salt? Will that work? Trace mineral salt is exactly what it says. It is trace mineralized salt. The salt is mined as it occurs naturally in the ground. There will be some trace minerals there. That is not a complete vitamin mineral pack, though. Don't confuse the two. In the sheep feeds, following the same logic that we did with the goats, starting with the baby lamb, we have a pelted lamb starter. That too would be considered to be baby food for that animal. Again, you can feed that up to about 5 to 6 weeks of age. At that point, you switch over to the lamb grower finisher. It's formulated to produce maximum lean growth in those young animals. Has Bovatec included for coccidiosis control. Has the organic selenium yeast, and it does have the ammonium chloride to help prevent urinary calculi. We have a lamb grower finisher that's in a coarse version for those people that want to see a coarse type feed. This one is medicated with CTC, or chlortetracycline. For the ewe, we have a 12% pelleted ewe developer and gestation feed. It is formulated specifically for gestating ewes, allows them to grow frame and structure in the young developing ewe lambs, and it is medicated with CTC at a level that helps prevent vibryonic abortions, which tends to be the source of most abortions And once they give birth, the 14% pelleted eulactation feed is an excellent choice with a highly soluble protein and energy components there, vitamins and minerals that are balanced for a lactating animal, and it too contains the selenium yeast and the ammonium chloride. Urinary calculi tend to not be a problem in mature animals, but anytime we have young baby lambs by the side of the ewe, they're probably going to start nibbling and consuming that feed, and we do have the ammonium chloride in there for that. We also have a very good general purpose sheep feed, a 13% pelleted sheep feed. Can be used in a variety of situations. It's economical, it's fully fortified, and it too has the ammonium chloride. One difference between the sheep and the goats, a lot of sheep producers want to produce their own feed, and we offer a 37% pelleted sheep concentrate that is medicated with Bovatec. It allows the producer to use this product along with his own farm grains to produce a complete feed. If they'll feed 1 part of this concentrate along with 3 parts grain, that would be a 16% crude protein feed. Also a sheep and goat block that's available when we want to utilize or supplement protein, vitamins, and minerals, and energy is not lacking. This makes an excellent choice for a self-fed type product that you can put out and allow the sheep to have access, sheep and goats both to have access to this. And then finally we have a sheep mineral. Following the same line as the goat product, it is a premium vitamin mineral that is designed specifically for sheep. Obviously it would have no copper in it, plus it does have molybdenum. Molybdenum ties up any copper that is there in their diet and keeps that from causing a problem. Finally, the show lamb feed with Bovatec, a premium product that has done extremely well with the Tennessee 4-H lambs over the past few years. It has high quality protein and energy sources so that we can optimize the genetic potential of those animals. Has steam-rolled corn and barley that a lot of people like to have in those show rations. It does have Bovatec for coccidiosis prevention, and it too has the ammonium chloride. Well, that completes the sheep and goat products that we have. If you'd like more information about our products or any of the management tips that have been mentioned here, please contact your local feed specialist. Thank you.